What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. And probably like a year ago, January of last year, in fact, you probably heard about this story where a female correctional officer for the California Department of Corrections was somehow overpowered while she was working in the control booth, right, of a building, and was taken advantage of and suffered horrible treatment at the hands of an inmate for some extended period of time, after which the guy ended up back in his cell, and she went and told her coworkers. It sounded ridiculous, right? It sounded ridiculous. I have done time in the California Department of Corrections, of course, on level 3 yards and level 4 yards. I talk to people every day who either have done time in California or are currently doing time in California, and I haven't heard anybody say how, oh yeah, this makes sense, right? So I didn't really talk about the story then. I figured more details would come out later. Honestly, I kind of thought that she was probably bullshitting, right? But now here this week, right? Fast forward a year, the dude Ransom has been charged in Tuolumne County with 11 different charges, all the charges that you would expect him to be charged with, given what she says happened in that control booth, right? Which is horrendous, and we'll get into that. And she also has filed a lawsuit, right? She's suing CDC, of course. This is that lawsuit. This is the play by play. It's interesting because it's very colorfully written, right? There's some sensational language used in here. There's definitely a political argument to be made. Now, I'm not saying that what she says happened to her didn't happen to her. I obviously I don't know. She says the California model is to blame. In reading what had happened, and you guys will see, let me know in the comments where the California model uh comes into play in all of the just perfect storm of failures by various correctional officers and staff. Just a whole lot of people had to mess up in just the right way for this to unfold the way that it unfolded. But it's not California model stuff. It's doing your fucking job type stuff, right? If this is true, then yeah, this lady, I feel for her, right? Let's get into the story. Let's get into the lawsuit, and you guys let me know what you think. It's I'm not sure what to think. I'll be honest. I don't know what to think. I'm curious with you guys. So this is all just the basic part, right? Like, hey, I'm the plaintiff. CDCR is the defendant. Blah blah blah. I filed these lawsuits, and so here we go. Facts common to all causes of action. On information and belief, inmate Ransom is currently incarcerated following convictions for a series of heinous and profoundly violent crimes, including the taking advantage of, and I'm not saying that to undermine that offense. I'm saying it because YouTube has automatic censors, and I don't want to get the video taken down. Okay, so I don't mean any disrespect by dancing around with the language. And ending the life of two women, one of whom was a mother whose infant child also lost her life. Like, he set them both on fire. It's a convenient telling of a story, but the dude is a monster, right? He shot some girl and left her on the side of the road. He went and snatched up this lady and then left her tied up in a garage. A couple days later, they find out the garage is on fire. She loses her life because of smoke inhalation. Apparently, her 1 year old had gone in there too and lost their life. Like, he is an evil dude. He grabbed some girl off the road with a knife, threw her in a van, and poured gas on her. She got out before he was able to light her on fire. Like, evil, sick, sadistic person. No matter how you slice it, right? And if there's a profile for somebody who would do some crazy shit as what's put forth in this, I guess he fits the profile, right? It's wild. A third victim, after enduring brutal violence, was doused in gasoline as Ransom attempted to ignite her as well. She miraculously managed to escape and survive. These acts of unparalleled cruelty and disregard for human life led defendant to classify Ransom as a level 4 inmate. Remember, defendant is California Department of Corrections, a designation reserved for the most dangerous and high risk individuals within the defendant's prison system. So that's kind of true, kind of not, right? It's not his unique, unparalleled cruelty and disregard for human life. It's he got sentenced to 84 to life. If you get 84 to life, you're going to go to a level 4 yard. When you got people that got struck out for stealing VHS tapes and they got life sentences, they also went to level 4 yards, right? It's there's a variety of factors in the classification model. Defendant engages in a process of reclassification of high risk inmates to a lower risk classification, level 3 or below, and transfers these hyper violent type inmates to far less secure facilities. Despite Ransom's extensive and depraved criminal history and classification status, defendant reclassified him and moved him from his higher classified and secured custodial facility to a less secure facility, Sierra Conservation Center, SCC, also known as Jamestown. Jamestown is a facility intended to house lower level classified inmates for minimal and or medium classified inmates. Jamestown also functions as a training center for incarcerated persons in wildland fighting techniques. So to be clear, Jamestown, this happened on a level 3 yard. Okay. I don't know if he was given an override to a level 3. He's been down since 2014, I think. It's a lot of classification hearings to go to. You lose 6 points or whatever it is, 8 points a year, however they do it. It may be that his points just dropped to a level 3, or maybe it was an override. A level 4 270 design building and a level 3 270, it's the same, right? There's not really a big difference. So this implication, yes, Jamestown has a fire camp. That's what it's most known for. That's not where he went. He didn't get put at fire camp. He got put into a level 3 building, right? With cell living and secure perimeter and all the shit. So this idea, well, here, let's keep going. Ransom was transferred to Jamestown. After his transfer, defendant did not provide notice to plaintiff, a female custodial officer employed by defendant, as to the increase in threat levels posed by Ransom based upon his reclassification and transfer to Jamestown. So again, I'm not aware of it being common practice for CDC to send out a memo letting officers know, or female officers or particular COs, hey, just so you know, this is who came off the bus today, right? It's, again, the dude is a sick and evil person. Those people get housed in prison. If you're going to work in a prison, you're going to work around people and be responsible for people that have done ridiculous, heinous, dangerous things, predatory, violent criminals. Jamestown's a piece of shit prison, so you have people that done some piece of shit charges like what this guy has done. That's the job description, right? It doesn't mean that officers, female officers, male officers, deserve to be preyed on or should be at risk of their life like that. But that's the job, though. Like, you got to put him in prison. He's in prison, So, like I said, I think there's politics at play here. Shortly after Ransom's arrival, approximately 2 weeks, at Jamestown, one of plaintiff's fellow custodial officers determined that Ransom should serve as a porter. Now, that's kind of throwing me off because only there 2 weeks and you get the porter job? Like, somebody was looking out for him. A porter in the context of defendant's custodial facilities refers to an inmate who is assigned specific work duties within the facility, primarily related to cleaning and maintenance tasks. Porters may also be tasked with ensuring areas such as housing units, day rooms, bathrooms, hallways, and other common spaces are kept clean and orderly. Porters also receive additional privileges in exchange for the work they perform, which may include increased time out of their cells, better access to certain areas, or eligibility for good time credits that could reduce their sentence depending on the facility or agency's regulation. Due to their increased access to certain areas of the prison facility, extended time out of their cells, and involvement in the day-to-day operations, porters often gain a deeper understanding of the inner workings of the facility, including details like correctional officer uniforms and shift change times. I think that's a stretch, right? Porters do get access to spaces, right, in the process of them doing their job. But you could sit in a cell and recognize officers' uniforms and their shift change. That's part of just being aware of where you're at in prison. Ransom, despite having been at Jamestown for a very short time, mere weeks, was designated as porter. So here's the day of the attack. On or about January 20th, 2024, at approximately 9:15 p.m., plaintiff was on duty as a custodial officer at defendant's Jamestown, Facility C, Building 3. Again, level 3 yard, cell living, kind of standard. Probably that's the most common type of cell living building that there is in the Department of Corrections. Plaintiff's fellow correctional officers Hernandez and Pinheiro, working the same shift, had completed their inmate count of Building 3 and communicated the count of inmates to plaintiff. A note on the term inmate count: an inmate count ensures all inmates are present and accounted for by visually verifying their physical presence in their assigned cell locations. This process is conducted systematically to maintain security, order, and accurate records within the correctional facility. True. So they dropped the ball, right? But that's not California model. That's just them not paying attention when they did count. Despite plaintiff's fellow correctional officers reporting that the inmate count had been completed and that Ransom was secured in his cell, this was categorically untrue. In reality, Ransom was concealed within a laundry cart filled with various items, including trash bags, beneath which he was hiding. Shockingly, despite conducting a purported search of the laundry cart, plaintiff's fellow correctional officers inexcusably failed to detect Ransom's presence, recklessly declaring the cart clear and falsely confirming that Ransom remained in his cell. This egregious lapse in procedure not only demonstrated a profound dereliction of duty, but directly enabled Ransom's concealment and subsequent actions. This is why I say there had to be like a perfect storm of things over and over and over and over for this dude to be able to pull this off. Uh, and it's when they said, "Do you think any of your coworkers should lose their jobs?" She jumped to, "No, it's the California model." What about these two? What the fuck? All right, so from within the control booth, plaintiff confirmed the count of Building 3, Facility C was clear via the SOM, Strategic Offender Management System. Plaintiff was then awaiting her relief officer. At approximately 9:20 p.m., plaintiff heard a knock at the door of Building 3's control booth. Upon reviewing the surveillance camera feed, plaintiff observed an individual wearing dark clothing, what appeared to be a raincoat and a hat, and carrying what plaintiff perceived to be a lunch bag. All conditions and observations consistent with the uniform and appearance of her relief officer. Plaintiff attempted to utilize a security mirror intentionally mounted inside the building's control booth, a critical feature meant to provide the custodial officer with an additional layer of security by visually inspecting any entrant. However, the mirror was previously broken and unrepaired or replaced, rendering it useless. Compounding this failure, various exterior yard lights on Facility C were inoperative, plunging key areas into darkness and further undermining the already outdated and extremely pixelated security camera feeds. Now, I have heard that when it comes to Jamestown, it's a rundown ass prison, right? I've never been there, but that's what I've heard. I've heard that it's been a rundown prison since before the California model, right? Inside the facility, the lighting system was similarly neglected, bulbs that remained frequently malfunctioned, leaving large sections of the building dimly lit or entirely dark. These hazardous conditions were exacerbated by the cloudy, scratched security glass overlooking the rotunda, which severely impaired plaintiff's ability to conduct any meaningful visual inspection of individuals entering the area. These egregious failures led plaintiff dangerously exposed and improperly equipped to perform her duties safely. Notably, defendant has since sought to remedy these inexcusable deficiencies, attached to the acknowledgement of the deplorable and unsafe conditions plaintiff was forced to endure and led to the unfathomable harm she suffered and continues to suffer. Okay? So all of that is just, she could barely tell who was standing out there. It looked right, so she buzzed a bit, right? Nearby Tower 15, a critical security post designed to provide a clear line of sight and safety overwatch for the building where plaintiff was stationed, was rendered completely ineffective due to the officer assigned to the overwatch position leaving their post approximately 45 minutes before the scheduled end of their shift. Their absence stripped plaintiff of a vital layer of security and left the control booth the plaintiff dangerously exposed. The absence of the Tower 15 officer was yet another catastrophic failure of CDCR to ensure that even the most basic safety measures, effectively abandoning plaintiff to perform her duties without the protections explicitly designed to safeguard her in such a high-risk environment. Facts. I agree. So you have COs who take account but don't really look inside the cell to see that the guy is there. Then they search the cart that got pushed outside the building, right? So the cart is now on the yard. And they search that, and this dude is hiding in there, and nobody noticed. Nobody notices him get in. Nobody notices him hiding. Then the tower cop that's outside of the building, right? That's overlooking the yard and would see this doorway where the relief CO comes in. That person's just missing, right? Because they would probably notice somebody jump out of a cart or whatever. Like, there's just there's layers to this of failure for sure. On information and belief, plaintiff's fellow custodial officers providing that the count was clear, as well as her knowledge of the work schedule and her knowledge of her relief officer's pattern practice of arriving a few minutes early, plaintiff was informed and of the belief the individual at the control booth door was her relief officer. Plaintiff unlocked the control booth door, permitting her relief officer's entry. The individual presenting themselves as the relief officer immediately lunged towards plaintiff, closing the distance between the two of them, clasped both of his hands around her throat and neck, lifted her off the ground, strangling her with her own weight. Plaintiff attempted to repeatedly kick, scratch, and claw. However, her attempts to free herself were unsuccessful. Now that would have to be terrifying. I can't imagine, right? That at that moment, you gotta be freaking the fuck out, right? The assailant eventually placed plaintiff on the floor, holding plaintiff's throat with one hand while grabbing for the loaded Mini 14 semi-automatic rifle, hereinafter referred to as assault rifle, staged within the control booth. It's funny the politicization of the term assault rifle, right? Because you have a lot of Second Amendment folks that are like, don't call it an assault rifle. That's that's a political term, right? It's just a rifle. But here, that's the word they choose to use. Maintaining his clutch at plaintiff's throat, the assailant kept the assault rifle pointed at plaintiff while he forcefully moved her to the rear of the control booth within a bathroom. Over plaintiff's continued struggles to free herself, the assailant stated words the same or similar as, "If you scream, I will stab you and I will shoot and kill your partners," referring to fellow correctional officers Hernandez and Pinheiro. Plaintiff mouthed the words, "Okay," at which point the assailant released his grip from her throat. The moments of initial chaos slowing briefly, plaintiff recognized the assailant as Ransom. Ransom ordered plaintiff to toughen up and stop crying, stating, "Knock it off. As long as you do what I say, no one will get hurt." He then demanded her to provide her full legal name, phone number, and address, threatening to kill her if she provided incorrect information. He stated, "I have a cell phone and I'm going to have my boy check to make sure you're not lying." She provided the personal information he demanded. He then stated, "I know you got your phone up here. All you COs bring your phones in. Get it out and show me you aren't lying." She complied and showed him her phone, which verified that that was her number. Near shift change, which I don't understand all that. Like, I don't get that. The whole obsessed with making sure that I have your right phone number. Near shift change, plaintiff would routinely collect the floor officer's equipment for the night. At this time, as was routine for shift change, fellow custodial officer Hernandez, one of the floor officers, placed his equipment in a bucket attached to a rope that plaintiff would pull up and into the control booth where the equipment would remain. You would see this, right? As doing time in prison, you would watch this process. It's just literally just a little bucket on a rope that they drop out and they put their stuff and they pull it back up on the rope. So Ransom demanded that plaintiff collect Officer Hernandez's equipment, threatening her by stating words, "Get everything now, the spray, the keys, the stick, all of it. And I want to see you do it. Don't say anything and don't hit no alarm. Don't try and signal your partners or they're all going to die and so will you." Under the extraordinary stress and duress, she began to retrieve Officer Hernandez's equipment. Plaintiff had a direct eye line of sight to Officer Hernandez and attempted to alert him of her perilous circumstances by mouthing the words, "Help me," but he didn't notice. While plaintiff completed gathering the equipment, Ransom continued to threaten her, stating, "Good job. Now, if you say anything to anyone after tonight, you try and tell, I will send my people to your address and have them stab up your baby daddy and your kids." Shortly thereafter, knocking was heard at the control booth door. Because this is my thought as I'm reading it. If he was faking that he was the relief cop, there still is an actual relief cop coming. Here we go. Plaintiff could not observe who was at the door as she was still concealed by Ransom in the bathroom. While pointing the assault rifle at her, He ordered her to see who was at the door and threatened her and said, "See who it is and don't make any motions for help, or I will kill your partners and you." Plaintiff positioned herself to observe the person at the door, advised Ransom the person appeared to be fellow correctional officer who was to be her relief. Ransom stated, "Figure it out. No one is coming up here, and if they do, I will shoot and kill them and you." She communicated through the control booth window to her relief officer, later determined to be Correctional Officer Vu, and informed him that she was unable to get the door to work. In an effort to de-escalate the situation, plaintiff explained to Officer Vu that she had been experiencing issues with the door and it now seemed to have completely stopped functioning. Both floor officers, along with Officer Vu, mentioned there's keys available to open the control booth doors. Plaintiff responded by telling Officer Hernandez, Officer Pinheiro, and Officer Vu that she couldn't locate the keys and she was not sure where they were, but they were not in the control booth. Plaintiff's efforts to keep her fellow custodial officers safe from ambush was successful. Officer Hernandez and Pinheiro then left the building. Vu went into the custodial officer's office in Building 3. So just went to the little CO's office at the bottom, which the CO's office is right underneath the control tower, right? Plaintiff told inmate Ransom that the other buildings have the same key to obtain manual entry and that her fellow officers would bring one over from another building. He responded saying, "Ain't nobody getting in the doors because I messed with them and shoved things in the keyhole. They can't put a key in there. You better figure something out. Say and do whatever you got to do to keep everyone away from this building." Plaintiff then walked over to the window where the control booth has a view of the custodial officer's office and informed Vu that the doors were working. Plaintiff stated, "I've been sick all night throwing up. I just need a little bit of time. If you could count building number 1 and building number 3 for a little bit, I would appreciate it." Officer Vu agreed. Plaintiff went back to the bathroom where Ransom was standing with the assault rifle. Ransom instructed plaintiff to turn on the fan and reposition the chairs in the control booth to obstruct the view from anyone looking up from the floor level of the building. Also directed plaintiff to cover the windows overlooking the sally port with a blanket that had been used on the floor to absorb water leaking from the back window due to rain seeping in. Plaintiff asked Ransom how he planned on leaving the control booth without being seen. He responded saying at 2:30 they unbar boxed the building. "When the CO leaves to count building 1, you're going to let me out of the booth and I'm going to go to my cell." Plaintiff felt further overwhelming dread as she was of the information and belief that this ordeal she was subjected to had been planned in detail, and based on Ransom's status as a porter, he was able to determine common officers' routines and patterns of routine. Again, you don't have to be a porter to notice that stuff. You just gotta look out your cell door, right? And then it explains what bar boxing is. It's just a manual way to lock and unlock the cells. Correctional Officer Vu started his count at 11 p.m. As soon as he left the building, Ransom, while fixing the assault rifle at plaintiff, instructed her to walk down the stairs of the control booth to the bottom landing where the control booth doors are located. Upon reaching the lower landing, Random shoved plaintiff against the wall, put his face directly to her face, and stated words similar as, "You know what time it is." She said, "I don't have no idea what time it is." He grabbed at her hips, stated words similar, "You're going to give me some." And she was overwhelmed with terror and fear. I'm not going to read the word by word of this. Tells her, "Stop crying. You're going to give me one or the other," right? She threatened plaintiff, or he threatened her that he would kill her and her family members. He wound up proceeding to take advantage of her. And then, so I'm trying to skip ahead and not read the stuff. Right, so he took advantage of her. Then the phone rang, so he stopped doing what he was doing, ordered her to answer the phone. She pulled her pants up, walked up the stairs. He followed, grabbed her by the arm and said, "Now you don't say anything or you know what will happen. I'm watching and listening, and stay away from that 40 launcher." The 40 launcher referring to nearby less than lethal weapons stored in the control booth. She answered the phone. On the other end was her supervisor, Sergeant Pearson. Sergeant Pearson asked about the problem with the control booth doors and then apologized, stating, "I'm very sorry for not making my tour of the facility. I have been busy." She responded that she was feeling sick, and Officer Vu had agreed to switch positions with her until she felt better. After the phone call ended, plaintiff walked back to the bathroom where Ransom was holding the assault rifle. He motioned with the rifle, pointing and ordering her to again walk back downstairs. Upon reaching the lower deck, so same thing again. He was in the middle of doing what he was doing to her. The phone rang. He stopped. She went upstairs. She has this phone call with her supervisor. Then when the phone call's over, she hangs up. He walks her back downstairs, gets back to doing the same thing that he was doing before. Um, Apparently doesn't finish, and says that, you know, I didn't finish because I don't want to bust inside of you. Short time later, Vu, and then walks her back upstairs. Vu comes back into the building and called upstairs regarding the count. His computer was not working, so plaintiff responded she could handle the count as she already had Psalms pulled up and could access the count procedure. She entered the count for building 1 and building 3 as Officer Vu had it written down. Now, mind you, as he's doing counts, he also should be looking and verifying in the cell. So multiple COs now have done count in that building and not accounted for the fact that he wasn't in his cell, right? That this dude Ransom wasn't in his cell. Ransom began talking to plaintiff about his family and his businesses. He mentioned he owned a construction company with his family, a tattoo shop in LA, flippantly stating words like, if you ever need a new tattoo, I can make it happen. Went on to speak about how he breeds French bulldogs and sold cars. Asked her what kind of horse he had, a white Subaru. He's like, oh, you need to drive something nicer like a Mercedes or a Lexus. I can make that happen. Ransom continued to tell plaintiff she could make up to $10,000 a week if she worked with them. He said, I'm not going to hurt you or your kids as long as you do this. And when you think you've made enough money, you can just stop. Out of sheer desperation and in an attempt to bring her ordeal to an end and ensure her fellow officers and family would not be hurt, she told Ransom, I will do this. I'll bring in what you want. Just leave my family alone. He continued to make conversation. Can I trust you? She's like, I just want to go home and be with my family. I want my partners to be able to go home and be with their families. Promise I'm not going to tell anybody. She sat still. She was trapped. She's scanning around the control booth, trying to think of a way to stop this. Her gaze is fixated on a pair of scissors hanging on an equipment board nearby. Ransom said, those are some sharp scissors, huh? In an attempt to deflect, she replied, oh, those things, those are dull. They wouldn't do anything. Inmate Ransom laughed. Approximately 2:15 in the morning, Officer Vu comes out of the custodial officer's office and calls up for the bar box keys. Ransom held the assault rifle and said, you know what to do. She proceeded to transition the bar box keys to Officer Vu. Plaintiff requested for Vu to unbar box building 3 first, explaining that when he returned, plaintiff would not have to do it and they could switch spots because she was now feeling much better. Officer Vu agreed. He conducted the count of building 3 and unbar boxed it. He then proceeded to the fire door and exited to complete the same process elsewhere. As soon as Officer Vu exited the building, plaintiff went back to the bathroom and told Ransom it was time for him to leave. Ransom, holding the assault rifle, pulled the plaintiff into the bathroom, pushed her against the sink, and said, you have to promise not to tell anyone, or else bad things are going to happen to you and your family. She continued to assure him that she would not speak of it. She would bring in the contraband as instructed. He then ordered her to walk to the control booth panel, which controlled the building's doors, open the bottom door. Ransom stated, you stay there and don't move until I get down the stairs and through the doors. And don't shoot me when I walk back to my cell. Seeking to ensure her ordeal would end, plaintiff assured Ransom she would not shoot, explaining that for her to do so would violate criteria for the use of deadly force. Seems like an odd statement, right? Ransom told plaintiff he would explain to the other inmates that he had an early medical appointment and was just returning, to explain why he had not been in his cell. He then proceeded down the stairs, leaning the assault rifle against the interior wall by the exit door, exited through the doors, returned to his cell. Plaintiff from the control booth operations panel opened Ransom's cell door and watched as he went inside and pulled the door shut. The door did not close properly at first, so she pressed the button to release it. He slowly shut it again. Based on her operational experience and information and belief, while Ransom's door appeared closed, the door was not fully latched. Officer Rue returned to the building. Plaintiff called down to him, instructed him to quickly gather all his belongings, his lunch, paperwork, and equipment, and come up to the control booth immediately. Plaintiff was aware of the information and belief that Ransom's cell door was not fully shut. He could open it at any moment. Plaintiff was in fear that Officer Vu could be subject to further attacks by Ransom at any moment. As soon as Officer Vu emptied the sally port, plaintiff closed the inner building grill gate to ensure Ransom could not open his cell door and gain access to or cause harm to Officer Vu. Once he was safely in the control booth, she engaged in small talk to avoid alarming him. Officer Vu handed plaintiff his count sheet. She entered the count into the Psalms for the 2:30 a.m. count. After completing the entry, she said, don't leave anyone out of their cells. Don't open any doors. I don't care what they say. I don't care if they claim it's a medical emergency. Do not open any doors or let anyone out. Mind you, it is 2:30 in the morning. There's no movement in the California Department of Corrections in a level 3 yard at 2:30 in the morning. But I get it, right? Just kind of want to make sure, I guess. Plaintiff walked down the stairs to the control booth. As she proceeded through the doors, she observed and verified that items such as sticks, nails, and screws had been shoved into the keyholes, which would prevent the doors from being opened manually. Approximately 2:35, she went to the sergeant's office where Sergeant Pearson was located. Plaintiff was overwhelmed, began to physically shake and sob uncontrollably, managed to communicate to Sergeant Pearson that she had been held hostage by an inmate within the control booth of Building 3. She managed to state words, "I was just held hostage at gunpoint, strangled, and taken advantage of." Pearson said, "Holy fuck, okay, fuck, I have to call the watch commander, but are you okay? What do you need? We need to get you to the TTA. The acronym TTA is Triage and Treatment Area, which serves as medical or aid station, typically where inmates, and it's underlined, inmates receive immediate care stemming from illness, injuries, or medical emergencies." Kind of makes sense because that's the closest medical-like place at the prison, right? It's right there. Plaintiff expressed to Sergeant Pearson, "I don't want to go to the TTA. I want to go to the hospital. My neck hurts. I'm having a hard time breathing and swallowing." He said he needed to contact the watch commander, Lieutenant Jeruji. I don't know. He contacted the lieutenant, repeated everything that was said, and then said, "I'm sorry, I don't know what to say or do. What do you need from me right now?" Plaintiff says she wanted to go to the hospital. She waited in the sergeant's office for approximately 15 minutes for the lieutenant to arrive. That's the watch commander. He walked in, didn't acknowledge her, went straight over to the sergeant and began questioning him. When the lieutenant finally approached plaintiff, he was cold and abrasive. He asked words, "Is the inmate in his cell? Was anything taken from the control booth, like ammunition, keys, or weapon?" Plaintiff explained that as soon as Ransom was secured in his cell, she conducted an inventory to ensure nothing was missing, including the ammunition from the assault rifle, which Ransom had control of from approximately 9:20 p.m. to 2:15 a.m. That's just crazy. Lieutenant then stated words same or similar as, "You cannot leave this room. You cannot use the restroom, wash your hands, or drink water." Plaintiff expressed that her neck was hurting badly. She was having difficult time swallowing and breathing. Lieutenant did not relent and said, "We have to wait for ISU to get here." ISU, which is the Investigative Services Unit, responsible for conducting investigations related to criminal activity. Plaintiff pleaded with the lieutenant, saying, "Please call McDonald," that's her fiance. "I need him here. He's supposed to come in for second watch. Please call him. I need him." Lieutenant said he would see what he could do, but he told the sergeant she's not to leave this room or speak with anybody. Just keep an eye on her. Plaintiff remembered she was not sure Ransom's cell door was fully closed. She urgently told the lieutenant, "Please don't send anyone in there right now. I don't think the cell door is closed all the way. Please, I don't want anyone getting hurt. Don't send anyone in without a full team." The lieutenant acknowledged plaintiff and then walked out of the office. Plaintiff sat there for over an hour waiting for ISU to arrive. She repeatedly requested someone call her fiance and complained several times that her neck and throat were in extreme pain. She wanted to go to the hospital. 4:45 a.m., Sergeant from ISU, Sergeant Kachigian, arrives and takes plaintiff's statement. She reiterated the pain in her neck and throat and her difficulty swallowing. At approximately 5:05 a.m., the plaintiff's fiance, Officer McDonald, arrived. Officer McDonald entered the sergeant's office, saw written statements nearby with writing indicating that plaintiff had been strangled and taken advantage of. Plaintiff's fiance then began questioning why the plaintiff was not receiving medical treatment and demanded she be taken to a hospital. ISU sergeant escorts plaintiff out of the facility, drove her first to Sonora Adventist Hospital. Then the sergeant was advised by a lieutenant of ISU that the plaintiff had been transported to the wrong hospital. She should have been taken to San Joaquin General. So she was taken from Jamestown at approximately 5:30 in the morning, and it was not until approximately 9 a.m. that she was finally transported correctly to San Joaquin General Hospital. Plaintiff presented at San Joaquin General, where her uniform and equipment were taken as evidence. She was subjected to the response of the sexual assault response team nurse, photographs of her injuries, marks, bruisings, abrasions, other visual signs of trauma. She got the examination, including swab samples from all her areas. She was given some medication to assist in preventing STDs. Advised she needs to go to the emergency room to have a CT scan to further address whatever damage was done to her neck and throat. She was escorted into the main entrance of the hospital, where she was again amongst fellow COs and other inmates, as the San Joaquin General Hospital is under contract with CDCR to provide medical care to inmates. Plaintiff was required to wait in the overcrowded hallway amongst both COs and inmates, all staring at her for an extended period of time. She was finally treated by a doctor, got a CT scan, and subsequently released. From the time plaintiff reported her ordeal to Sergeant Pearson at approximately 2:35 a.m., it took 6 hours for plaintiff to receive care for her extensive trauma and injuries. There you go. The rest of this is just explaining how this qualifies as sexual harassment and that kind of stuff. So what do you guys think, man? It's tricky because I and it goes in here in these parts. It really makes a big deal of Ransom going to a level 3 yard and her not being made aware of the fashion in which she is in much more danger now with an inmate like this under her supervision. Again, I don't think that there's really any protocol for that. Um, and yeah, it's a tricky one because I still find the story hard to believe. Um, I'm not gonna say that it's not true. It's just yeah, and if true, man, it's hard to imagine a worse experience, right? It's hard to imagine something scarier than that. Uh, but the DA has filed charges, right? So uh, the DA is saying that this dude did all of this and believes that there's some evidence. She's filing her lawsuit. We will see how this unfolds, but you guys let me know in the comments. What do you think? What do you think of all this? Uh, it's a it's just crazy, fucking wild. I'm kind of speechless. Anyways, help others move in excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. Help your community because they need you. And stay tuned, man. We got more content coming. I will link to these documents in the description of this video so that you can go look at yourself if that's what you want to do.